Which NBA stars would be most vulnerable to a team shakeup if they were to suffer a first-round exit? The regular season resumes tonight, and the Los Angeles Lakers are ready to ramp Luka up. What is it going to mean for their standing in the Western Conference? And are the Boston Celtics finally waking up from their post-title slumber? I'll ask Matt and Hayes all of that and more today on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day. We are free. We are available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Doug Branson, host of Locked On Hornets and your Shot Clock Sherpa, guiding you through the NBA's biggest stories with the help of Locked On's local experts. And with me are two of Locked On's premier national NBA experts from the Locked On Nuggets podcast and senior NBA writer for the Action Network. He's the man of 1,000 podcasts. It's Matt Moore.
Hi, Doug. Hi, Doug. Hi, Doug.
Hi. How are you? You good?
I'm good, man. I would know we were supposed to do like a little cute intro. I'll have a better one for you tomorrow.
Gotcha. And from the Locked On Bulls podcast, he's our Prince of Petty. It's Hayes.
Stop tagging me in New York pizza versus tavern style conference. I did not say what I said yesterday to start a whole new argument, people.
Well, that's listen, that's the whole reason we're here. That's the whole reason we exist, is to start new arguments. All right, let's move to a game to start this show called I Spy. And we'll start with a quote from Howard Beck on a recent podcast who said, quote, "I'm constantly checking in with executives around trade deadline about what we saw, what we didn't see, what's next. And in this league, you are always on the lookout for who's the next wave of stars that are going to get dealt. Somebody out of the blue said, keep an eye on Ja Morant this summer. I'm just saying it's one of those things I'm just kind of keeping an eye on if they were to flame out early," unquote. I love a good game of keeping an eye on players around the NBA. So let's play I Spy. You each have two eyes. Which two players are you keeping an eye on this offseason for a potential move if their team slips and falls in the first round of their respective conference playoffs, Matt?
You know, when I was writing the slop articles around the trade deadline, I started to use this phrasing of like, I'm keeping an eye on. It's the dumbest thing ever. He's traded or he's not. Like, you know, you can't keep an eye on him. It's not like he's not a rabbit trying to sneak out the back. It's a really ridiculous phrasing. I actually brought this up on the Squad Show West this week. Now, it wasn't based off of any reporting. It's just like a logical thing here. The new CBA demands that if you are a guy who projects or is billed on the marquee as the best player on the team, and you want that super max contract, every team is going to go through the process of, are you worth it? And Luke is the defining characteristic of this, where the Mavericks looked at him and were like, nope, not worth it. We can debate that. We'll talk about that later. With Ja, the Grizzlies are going to go through the same thing. Is he worth this? Is he worth our long-term investment and what this is going to look like with Jaren being their best player this year? So I think it's really interesting. But the name I'll say is, look, Giannis has been on this block for years, and every time they traded for Eric Bledsoe, they traded for Drew Holiday, they traded for Damian Lillard. They've done the work to keep him in town, but it sure seems like they're running out of gas to keep this thing going. And I am at a point where, even though I thought I have criticized the conversation around him previously as a trade target, this summer I am extremely interested to see what happens if they do not make a deep run, because Giannis is too competitive to keep hanging around, I think.
Giannis makes a lot of sense there. I think that there's been so much talk around that for so long now. It's really only been like the last two seasons and a half, but it could happen. I don't know that this team, it's not even about making the first round, but I'd say this: look out for Devin Booker with the Phoenix Suns. I know the question Doug asked is they flame out in the first round, but like, what's to be said if you don't even make it there? Phoenix Suns already reportedly shopping Kevin Durant. I think if they were to go ahead and say, we're just going to have to do as much blowing up of this situation as we can, Devin Booker's probably going to net them more back, and it would make a lot of sense. I know he's their guy. I know they drafted him, but I say keep an eye out for Devin Booker.
I'm gonna go off the path here a little bit, because you mentioned Devin Booker, a lot of trade talks around Kevin Durant around the deadline, and we got some comments from him relayed to him via Steve Kerr, who said essentially they're like, why would Kevin Durant want to return to Golden State? And that was where all the rumors were when he caught so much flack for that. And Kevin Durant replied, like, that's not why he didn't want to go back to Golden State. He just did not want to get traded at the deadline, and he had some influence and was able to stay in Phoenix. How much credence do you give that explanation from KD, Matt? Like, are you buying that he just wanted to stay in Phoenix and see it out? Or was there really going to be some issues going back to Golden State?
Moving midseason is a hassle, and we don't have any insight into his private life, nor should we. So, like, it may just be as simple as, like, he's got relationships or a business venture or whatever going on, and he just didn't want to move. Like, I think that's totally reasonable. I think a lot of guys that, especially if you, like, KD doesn't have kids. If you have kids, it's a nightmare. It's a complete nightmare. Like, I just always try to imagine being like, hey, if you have to, like, you come home from work and are like, hey, hon, so funny story. We live in Milwaukee now. Like, that to me would be like a very dramatic kind of reaction, right? If it was like, hey, by the way, what do you think about Utah? Like, having that conversation, again, I like the state of Utah, but like having that conversation with my wife would not go well. So I do think that most of it's just like, he didn't want to mess with it. It's fine. He can make that decision this summer and evaluate where that team is. But at some level, something is not right where the conversation around KD does not match what he says is going on. Somebody's lying, and I don't know who.
It's an interesting problem, Hayes, for Phoenix to have. Their destination is too good. Like, you have Bradley Beal, who also doesn't want to leave Phoenix. Like, they've just made it too wonderful to be there.
Apparently nobody cares about winning anymore. It's just about the locale. But
there we go. Now we're getting to it.
Nobody cares about winning. We just want to stay where we're at. But I mean, Kevin Durant is an interesting name. They've already shopped him. I do think they can look to revisit that. And it makes sense if you just want to wait in the offseason. Like Matt said, moving midseason is clearly a hassle, one that I would never have to understand. So why not just kick it down the road, wait till the offseason, and see what shakes out then.
All right, let's head back to the Grizzlies. They're second in the Western Conference right now. They finally got past the Rockets. They beat the Rockets, but the Nuggets are breathing down their neck. Locked On Grizzlies host Joe Mullinax says that Jaren Jackson Jr. has unquestionably been their best player this season, but a deep postseason run still hinges on number 12.
The Memphis Grizzlies are going to go on a postseason run. They need Ja Morant. Ja Morant has to be the Ja Morant of old. But it's important to point out that it's not just his shooting at the rim that is down. His mid-range shooting is among the worst that he's had in several years in terms of efficiency. This is not the same Ja Morant that we've seen that led the league in paint scoring as a point guard. That guy's not on the floor right now. If Ja Morant is the Ja Morant that he is right now, the Grizzlies could very well lose in the first round in a loaded Western Conference. You need Ja Morant to get back to what he does best. He needs to be on the floor first and foremost. That's a very fair point. But assuming that availability, you need Ja Morant to slash and cut and be aggressive and attack in the lane. Ja being a consistent contributor to this Grizzlies roster at the caliber of player that we know Ja can be. That has to be a focus for Coach Taylor Jenkins and his staff going into this post-All-Star stretch.
All right, Matt, what do you think about what Joe said there? Is there anything the Grizzlies should be doing, anything that they can do to help Ja Morant get back to his former slashing self?
I actually disagree with Joe here. I don't think they need him. They don't need him to be that guy. Yeah. They need him. What he's basically done this year, the shooting could be better. He's like 23rd percentile around the rim. Not great, Bob. He's not shooting great from 32%. So like the shooting hasn't been good enough. But he's averaging 7.4 assists, and his assist rate is through the roof. Like, he orchestrates things. He's kind of been a pure point. And the results have been that the Grizzlies are way better in half-court offense than they were in any of the years prior with Ja. So, to me, it's like, look, the whole offense is benefiting from the role that Ja has taken. His usage is still high. He's just directing a lot of things and making things happen for his teammates. I have a hard time. I don't necessarily know if it's like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Would it be great if Ja were to have a phenomenal series? Yeah, and he can do that if he gets the right matchup. But I don't think you need to force things or reconfigure it when you've had success and you have what I think is a more sustainable approach with defense and a better team approach to your offensive system, Hayes. I think this works for Memphis. I don't think they need superstar Ja.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that Ja can always get back. Like, if they're in a series where you need somebody to take over, Ja can get back to that. But the version of Ja that we're seeing now is kind of a more refined version. You want that. You're top 10 in offense. You're top 10 in defense. You're top of your conference. You don't need to change a whole bunch when you're doing that. But the fact that Ja has that other gear that we know, that everybody knows he can goes into when needed, fine, tap into that in certain games. Tap into that maybe in the playoff series. But I don't think you need Ja to go back to what he did before for the remainder of the season for them to be a threat. When you're top 10 in offense, you're top 10 in defense, you're a threat regardless. This team has always been better when all the pieces are fitting together. And per what Matt said, like, the pieces are fitting together better now with Ja being more of an orchestrator and playing actual point guard.
Joe Mullinax has some ideas around how Zach Edey actually might be able to help Ja to get back to his former self. Make sure to check that out on Locked On Grizzlies if you're interested. Coming up, basketball resumes tonight with the Lakers taking on the Hornets. They're facing off for the first time since their deadline deal for center Mark Williams fell apart. We have the latest on that and the continued narrative battle over Luka Doncic's time in Dallas. More ahead here on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season, it's heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in awarded winnings, Prize Picks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Here's how it works. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, you could look at the board, maybe select more on Jason Tatum on points, more for Trae Young on assists. They're ramping Luka's minutes up. Maybe you go more on assists for Luka Doncic in LA. The best part, Prize Picks keeps it simple. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and their fast, secure withdrawals mean you get paid quickly when you win. Plus, they've got Taco Tuesday promos that give you discounted player projections for even more value. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the Super Sweet Millie winners' big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team has a free and daily newsletter. Go to LockedOnDaily.com, subscribe, and stay up to date with local expert analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shear, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. If you subscribe to the Locked On Hornets daily newsletter, you're going to get a breakdown of tonight's regular season game that resumes, regular season action resuming tonight with the Lakers and the Hornets, making up a game that was moved due to the California wildfires. Lots of interesting storylines in this one. Luka Doncic will see his minutes ramped up. The Lakers will welcome back several of their key defensive role players, and there's still a question as to LeBron James's availability. So my first question on this is, what will the Lakers have to show you in this game and over the next 30 or so to convince you that they can be a real threat in the postseason, assuming they are healthy, Hayes?
That they can play enough defense. I don't think they have to be elite defensively. They're not going to be elite defensively, but they can play enough defense to where it's not completely torpedo, whatever the word I'm looking for is. It is torpedoing. I'm messing up there. Torpedo? Yeah,
torpedoing.
You got it. The offense and the efficiency that they can have there. That's the thing I'm looking for, as well as bench production. I think performance off the bench, their defense, if the defense could be good enough, those are the things I'm looking for the most for the Lakers.
Hayes, not a sailor. We're going to talk about the Kamenetsky brothers, who are basically touting Jared Vanderbilt as Rudy Gobert, which is hilarious. There's nothing. They're going to put up a bunch of points tonight versus the Hornets because the Hornets are terrible and they're trying to be terrible, and that's fine. And they're going to look awesome, and then they're going to be real teams, and they're going to win some games because their offense is great. This defense is not going to be good. Guys, Jackson Hayes is starting at center. What do you think? Alex Len is the alternative. What are we talking about here? Jared Vanderbilt's going to save you? There is no saving you. You are going to play Austin Reeves and Luka Doncic in a lot of lineups. That is food. any team that decides, hey, instead of running our base stuff, let's actually target some actions for what they can't cover. You have the menu. You have the entire spread in front of you. It is a summer barbecue feast down in Lockhart, Texas. Do whatever you want to that team. There's nothing they can do. If I'm wrong and Jared Vanderbilt is, as Andy Kamenetsky believes, Dennis Rodman, then maybe we can talk about it. But as of now, there's nothing. They're going to score a lot of points and everyone's going to go, yay! But until they actually get some work done on the defensive end this summer, which they will, they're not a serious contender, period and done.
It seems like that JJ Redick is going to have to work overtime on his whiteboard to figure this out, right? Because it just seems like you have one set of lineups that work for them offensively and another set of lineups that work for them defensively, but mixing and matching those pieces is where the difficulty comes in, where the trade-offs come in, and a lot of that is rooted in their lack of center play.
If they don't play their good players, then they can defend, Doug. If they play their good players, then they can't defend. That's the best way to put it.
All right, let's hear from those Kamenetsky brothers over at Locked On Lakers. They are more bullish on the defensive upside of this team, and they do see some upward mobility in the Western Conference seeding.
Denver, if the Nuggets stay healthy, the way that Denver played going into the break, winning 8 straight, I don't necessarily expect the Lakers to catch them, even though they're only 2.5 games behind them. But they could certainly catch Houston, who was really slumping and going in 3-7 into the break. Lakers are a half game behind them for the 4 seed. It is certainly not out of the question that the Lakers could end up with home court advantage in the first round.
The Lakers are situated where if they handle the majority of their business, they should be fine because they're the team being chased as opposed to the team that actually has to make up ground. Perfect world, you'd love for them to pass Denver, get home court, whatever. But as far as the baseline of what they are trying to accomplish, and I think what really matters most is stay out of the play-in. They are not golden, but they've set themselves up well to do it.
Hayes, you mentioned that the Lakers needing to play enough defense, particularly when Luka Doncic is on the floor. How much of that is reliant on LeBron James to find a slightly different gear than maybe he had pre-All-Star break?
I think for this season, it's really determined on that. Like you need LeBron to be able to go into that gear to kind of offset what you have here. I get the Jared Vanderbilt thing as well, but like it really does hinge on how good is LeBron, how much is the turnovers limited, how good is he defensively. I think for them to go on a meaningful stretch here,
they're gonna be fine. They're gonna wind up with I have them in the 4 seed right now. Because teams are not going to target their guys in the regular season because teams, for some reason in the end, because it's too much work in the NBA for you to actually game plan. It's just too much work with the schedule. So everyone's just going to run their base stuff and they'll have enough wins and the schedule is easy enough. I will say this, one thing I looked at, they've got 30 games left versus an average of about 27.5 league wide. And it's like, is that really a big difference? It's 2.5. It's massive. The problem is if you have more games now, what you're always chasing is losses. That's what you're trying to do here is you're chasing losses. You can't make up losses. You can make up wins. You can't make up losses. So you're already behind Memphis and Denver in the loss column, and you have more games remaining than they do. So that's more opportunities for you to lose. So that's kind of a problem for them getting seeding, but I've got Houston as the 5. I've got Lakers as the 4. They'll be totally fine. I just don't think that they're going anywhere.
All right, let's stick with Luka, but I want to talk about the battle for the Luka AD trade narratives that is continuing, definitely continued over the All-Star break with The Athletic running a profile of Nico Harrison, the general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, that defended the trade in a lot of ways that we've heard previously, questioning Luka's commitment to fitness and preparation. You had Bob Voulgaris, a former executive with the Mavericks, who went on a podcast and really relayed a story about a rookie Doncic indulging in large post-practice Arnold Palmers before the team eventually took them away. Meanwhile, you had players like Anthony Edwards, who was interviewed about it and asked about Doncic's weight during All-Star Weekend and said, quote, "He didn't look like he was 270 to me. He averages 30 points, 10 assists, and 8 rebounds. I don't give a damn if you're 300 pounds. You're fine with me." Matt, what do you make of this continued back and forth over Luka's weight, how teams view weight, nutrition, conditioning in a world in which 2 of the greatest players we have in the league right now, they don't look like the ideal image, the poster image of a ripped basketball player?
That's an interesting point, but it's very like this is what's really key. Jokic was still underperforming relative to what he could be capable of before he started working with Felipe, the trainer in Denver. After games, that was the secret for him. Is like he got serious about it. He understood that he didn't want to be out of shape anymore, and so he plays the game. Then he goes and he does a workout afterwards, and that excess burning is really what helped reshape him and get him into a much better place physically. The thing with Luka is it's like the weight is an indicator. The weight's not the problem. So when Ant's like, I don't care how much, the Mavs problem was the process that led to that weight. If he was working every single day and putting in all the work and in the weight in the weight room and showing up on time for practices and going full out and all the stuff that they wanted him to do and took the approach that they wanted, he would still be a Maverick. I don't think they should have made the trade because at some level you just have to be like, I hope he gets it and live with it. There's a level of talent that is sadly inescapable in the NBA, but like, I understand the idea here. Like, it's very clear that he was driving everybody nuts, not with being overweight, but with the things that led to him being overweight and not listening to anybody. You want to feel like everybody's on the same page and committed. And Luka was just like, what if I just show up and drop 30, 10, and 10? And fans are like, cool, that's all I want because you don't have to deal with the rest of it. I do understand their point on this, even if I still disagree with the trade, Hayes.
Yeah, I disagree with the process that the trade went through. Like how you got to deciding that you wanted to move on from Luka. Okay, like we can take like it's the fact that you didn't start a bidding war. It's the fact that you didn't like that's the biggest thing here. If you're upset with his weight, the conditioning, all that, okay, it is what it is there. But I think the biggest thing that was missed here by the Dallas Mavericks was you should have started a bidding war. If you would have made this more obvious, you could have got way more back. You set your franchise back. You got a first-round pick that's going to be low. You got Anthony Davis back, who's already hurt, right? You got Max Christie is the best thing that you probably got out of that as far as long term. That's not good for Luka, a player that's under 25. So in talking about the weight, whatever is there, the picture-perfect NBA player, like go back and look at some of the players, even in the 90s. They weren't all in amazing shape. He's able to still be productive. If you wanted him to be in better conditioning, great, cool, that's amazing. But it's a comedy of errors is really what it is.
The round mound of rebound. We all remember that. Charles Barkley, sort of prototypical guy who wasn't always in the best shape. I've got one more question on this that I'm curious about, and it has to do with Kobe Bryant. I'll get to that coming up in just a moment. Plus, we're going to talk about the long-term future of the two J's in Boston. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. John Corrales has some interesting thoughts on that. That's all coming up on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by TurboTax. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so that you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com, only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Maybe it's your first watch on YouTube, youtube.com/@LockedOnNBA, where you can leave us a comment on all of the debate topics that we do on this show. Let us know what you think. I've got one more question as it relates to this. So you have Nico Harrison on one side, you've got Rob Pelinka on the other with the Lakers. Both of them have a connection to Kobe Bryant, who famously had the Mamba mentality, the work ethic that was that people drooled over, that executives drooled over. They all wanted players that could work as hard as Kobe Bryant. And yet these two individuals seem to view this Luka situation differently, with Nico Harrison looking at Luka and saying, that's not anywhere near Kobe Bryant. And Rob Pelinka saying, you come on board, we'll figure it out from here. How do you sort of deal with that in your mind? How do you put those two things together, Matt?
I think the Lakers were desperate enough to reconfigure. So think about all the birds that they killed with this stone. They set up the post-LeBron and AD future. They completely realigned the next 10 years of the franchise. They added a star, but not only that, but they reshifted the balance of power. Clutch is no longer in charge because now it's Luka's team. It's no longer LeBron's team. This is going to be Luka's team. They're going to reconfigure everything around him, and that reinsures Rob Pelinka's job security. He's the guy that brought Luka Doncic on board. So that, to me, is like one of the keys here. I also think that there's kind of a very correct notion from Rob Pelinka that Nico Harrison very, very dumbly did not acknowledge, which is Luka's now going to get it. He's going to get it in LA. He was always going to get it, probably. He was always going to get it. But now there's an observational bias here. Now that everyone's talked about how he doesn't work hard enough, he's going to work hard enough, and everyone's going to go, you were so dumb for thinking he didn't work hard enough when he didn't work hard enough before. But now that you said he didn't work hard enough, he works hard enough. That's how this goes. That's the history of the NBA.
Yeah, so to Matt's point there, Hayes, is all of this leaking, this profile that we see in this Athletic here of Nico Harrison and all of the focus on his health, is it just making things worse?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think they're going to be what it's. I don't know if it gets much worse than death threats. I don't know if it can get much worse than that. So,
fair point.
I mean,
that's a fair point.
So, there it goes. Like, Luka is going to figure it out. I think now that you've put in with LeBron and we know how much work LeBron does put in, he's going to see that. And you hope that some of that's going to wear off on Luka. And also, it just getting traded wakes people up. And so, if that's the one knock that, outside of the personality issues that people are using, that you're not committed enough to your conditioning, now watch Luka this offseason commit to his conditioning. And that's when everybody should start being afraid. Because if Luka's already done and accomplished what he's accomplished with his conditioning being not great, imagine a fully conditioned Luka. Imagine that.
Nico Harrison does not understand fans. I don't know how a shoe executive did not understand fans, but it's true. They don't care about any of this, man. They're never going to be like, okay, he drank Arnold Palmer's after practice. All right, I see what you're saying. Oh, he was real. They don't care. He hit the shooty hoops and averaged 30-10-10. That's all they care about, man. The botching of this from a PR standpoint is worse than the trade return, and it's the worst trade of all time. Impressive work by Nico.
I keep thinking about something that you brought up on a previous podcast about how so many of these teams are looking to build a certain culture, and that's going to have an effect on the kind of rosters that they put together. And sometimes that can be a huge benefit as you build that culture, and sometimes it can actually limit you in terms of the amount or kind of talent that you can bring in. So that's why all of this is interesting to me, and we'll see how they continue to figure things out in Dallas once they finally get healthy, and we'll see it tonight in LA. All right, so in this whole podcast, there's this like future theme, and we're going to continue it with the All-Star break wrapping up. A lot of Locked On local hosts are peering into the crystal ball, including Locked On Celtics host John Corrales, who examines the long-term viability of the Celtics' two Js, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who will have the longer, more viable career. Let's take a listen.
I think that Tatum has the potential for more longevity for a couple of reasons. One, he's taller, so he can transition into more of a, if he can't drive past anybody anymore, if that part of his game's not working, he can definitely kind of end his career as a pick setter, pick and roll kind of player. He can morph into a Chris Bosh type. Jaylen will have to find a way to specialize, which means probably he'll have to make himself a much more reliable three-point shooter. He's more of slasher type, scorer type fadeaways that rely on a big athletic jump. And I think if he's going to specialize in anything, he's going to have to really turn into like a 40% three-point shooter. He's just going to have to be willing to become a bigger catch and shoot type of threat.
So really interesting stuff. If you want to check out the whole thing, make sure to head over to Locked On Celtics. So both of these players, they're on huge deals that run up to 28-29. Tatum has a player option in 29-30 for north of $71 million. Hayes, which of these players do you think has a better chance of finishing their career in Boston with some of that information that you got there from John Corrales?
I think Jason Tatum. If I had to pick between the two, I still am somebody who thinks that they're both going to be there for a long, long time. But if I had to pick between the two, I think Jason Tatum. I think he just has the game that's easier to build around. I think he's also the player that is talked about more there forever, however that much that matters. But I think when you're looking at filling out a full team, I think that Jason Tatum makes it easier on what you can do and what you can bring around that team. Not to say that Jaylen Brown makes it worse or bad, but if I just had to pick between the two, it would be Tatum.
I think this conversation is really nice because it assumes that we're all going to be alive in 2029. That's nice.
Well,
so look, Jason Tatum, I think, is going to be a Celtic for the entirety of his career. I don't think Jaylen Brown finishes as such. I think eventually Jaylen Brown, there's always, Simmons has talked about the disease of me. And I do think that there's a little bit of that eventually creeps in with teams. Winning titles is almost never enough. And you saw that kind of in the Last Dance documentary. So even if they win more titles, Jaylen, I think, has been really mature in his approach. He's also really struggled this season. Like, he's just not having a great year. He was phenomenal last year. He was so good. He was their best player. Yeah, he was their best player in terms of performance last year. Tatum's the best player in terms of skill. Brown's not finishing well at the rim. He's like, the shooting hasn't really been there as much. He's not creating the same way that he did last year, in part because Porzingis has been out. It's kind of evolving. And I think that probably the next evolution of the Celtics, especially with new ownership coming in, that probably is going to demand some restructuring of contracts, probably means that I think Jaylen Brown winds up going somewhere else and trying to be the number one guy somewhere else.
A few minutes left here on the podcast. I want to shift gears into the present. When you look at how the Celtics finished their pre-All-Star break period, they won 3 straight. They finished 8-2 in their last 10 after they fell off the Cavs pace. How much do you attribute that, Matt, to them coasting, and how much of that is that Boston has a legitimate weakness?
I think there's a consensus that it's coasting. I don't feel that way. I'm influenced a lot by having watched the 2023 Nuggets try and repeat, right? The 23-24 Nuggets try and repeat. The Celtics look exactly like that team to me, all the way down. Everyone thought they were going to, like, opening night, they killed the Lakers. The Nuggets are just going to run it back. This team is going to roll. Mid-season, who's stopping Nuggets? They beat the Celtics at home. No one, like, this is going to be the finals and the Celtics have their number. And then they ran out of gas because it's really hard to repeat. Boston has problems at the rim. They're not bad. Like, this is the key with Boston. You can't find things where it's like they're not good at this. You can just find things that they're not quite as good as they were last year. And there are those areas, particularly around the rim. If they can find a team that can actually limit their three-pointers, that's going to be a real problem for them. I don't think that there's a team in the Eastern Conference. I think they're going to be okay. I don't think this team is as good. I think they're live to get the number 1 seed. The Cavs have slipped, and the Celtics' strength of schedule is easier. There's a good chance that if they push, they could wind up capturing the 1 seed. But I don't necessarily think that changes kind of the equation here. It really just comes down to, if they face a team that can limit their threes, or if they just miss a bunch in a series, they're going home. Everything relies on that. They're a really good team all around, but they're too dependent now in this form this season on the 3-point stuff, and that causes some variability, and that causes some vulnerability, I think, Hayes.
Yeah, the 3-point reliance, we've seen it before. Like, it's great when you're hitting them at a good clip. The moment that efficiency goes down, all right, what are you going to do next? Now, I still think that Boston has a really good chance to make it to the finals. I don't know about repeating. It depends on what team they come up against. But the matchups this year are going to be really interesting to see, because they're probably not going to come up against where every team that they face off against in the playoffs are going to be missing a major component to their roster, on top of the fact of what we've talked about the last couple of episodes. Like, not to say that teams have figured out how to completely stop Boston, because that's just not the thing, but they figured out how to play better against Boston. So now with that equipped with things, and teams, it's a copycat league. Once a team has some sustained success against you, especially in the playoff series, the next team is going to refine on that. And that's going to be the interesting part to watch in the playoffs this year for Boston, is as teams have started to figure them out already, how does that refine in the playoffs? And then in the series, how much can that be exploited, on top of how hot are you from 3?
Boston resumes play tomorrow night against the Philadelphia 76ers, who added Lonnie Walker to their lineup. For more on that, make sure to check out Locked On 76ers with Keith Pompey and Kayla Santiago. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. If you like what you heard today, subscribe to Locked On NBA wherever you get podcasts, including on YouTube. Enjoy tonight's action, be kind to each other, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On NBA.